you can see there's lots more people coming up now. I don't think we've got another American on the stage coming up, but joining Patrick are 4 more people. They'll sit under the beautiful photographs of themselves, and I'll leave you in Patrick's hands to introduce them. Please make them welcome.
I have taken and moved the chair, so it's okay. Well done.
Just
excellent.
A bit of musical chair.
Place for everyone. No, I've got the wet chair. You're okay. It would be very rude not to do that. So, Mel, that was excellent, wherever you've now gone. Probably a long way away from me, I suspect. Quite wise. But a really good sort of backdrop to this panel conversation. And I think, the question that I was left with at the very end of that is sort of like, so are we moving quickly enough? Are we urgent enough? What do we need to do next? So there's a bunch of challenges there. 2050 is just around the corner. Like, we need to start to do things as we go forward. So this panel very much is about that conversation. So Megan here on my right is got tremendous experience now within the Jobs and Skills Australia, but also from her time with AI Group, and we'll talk to what she's seeing at a system level from a reform side. We've got Yasminka, who is from Microsoft, again, massive sort of history in sort of the delivery of training within a commercial as well as a public sort of setting. And she'll talk about what she's seeing around the industry education engagement. We've got Glenn, who's going to talk from a LinkedIn perspective around some of the needs and skills that they can see. And we've got Sally, who is a CEO of a TAFE, and she's going to give, I hope, a really interesting insight into what delivery really looks like and what some of the challenges are that she's seen that needs to be addressed if we are going to treat this as a system as we go forwards. So we'll start with Megan. Where are we headed? What's the opportunity? Recognising that you've got constraints on what you can and cannot say, but I know you're going to be suitably engaging.
Thank you. Well, a good question. That constraint was acknowledging that we're in caretaker, so I'll put that out there, and that I am just speaking on the work that has gone before. But where we're heading, it's a good question, because where do we want to head has to be part of the answer. So if we look at it from a point of view of disruption and the mega trends that Melinda talked about and all those sorts of things, one comment I would make in relation to that is that it will happen to us, with us, or because of us, unevenly. And so we can have these really top-level conversations or national conversations, and they are very important things to do, but what happens on the ground to either individuals or companies and whatnot plays out in a really uneven way. So we must make sure that we nuance conversations and we allow all that diversity to flourish within it. But then moving on to where are we heading in terms of the education and training system or future skill needs, I would contend we're actually a long way away from where we need to be heading, and we're a long way away from how we need to get there. And I'm not even really sure that we're having the right conversations. So a lot of recent work I've been doing is around on the need to harmonise tertiary education in this country, so vocational and higher education. I might pick that up more in a later question, but I want to focus in on skill for a moment. And I noted you asked Melinda a question around skill and the importance of it and what's the relationship of it. I'd actually challenge everyone in this room to see if we have even a common understanding of what we're talking about. We're talking about that. There is no agreed common definition of skill in this country, and I sit in rooms where we're talking about skill. If I talk to vet sector people, it's a pretty task-focused conversation or competency-based conversation. I talk to higher ed people, it's quite different again. But so we need to, and we are doing work on that at JSA. We are developing a national skills taxonomy. Our number one thing is to get a definition. But we have a conversation in this country where skill is reduced to an old-fashioned perception of skill as being male technical skills. Until we move past that, we're going to have very limited discussions about skill. So that will then help us get somewhere better.
Are we ready to start to have a common language of skills that underpins our education and training system? Are we ready for a harmonised education and training system?
I think if we're not ready, we need to get ready, because these are incredibly important positionings to help us deal with the future that we're all talking about and grappling with, and including the speed of it. But when I talk about skill and the importance of getting this better understanding and a common language around skill, I'm not talking about content, I'm talking about skills. So put cognitive skills in the mix, but also it's about then it becomes about the relationship between skill and knowledge, and how they are continually put together, assembled, reassembled, disassembled, and indeed applied. And that's the future for the education and training system and the world of work, and the relationship across all of that. So it's not fixed, it's dynamic to meet that really dynamic future that's ahead of us. So it's quite a conceptual thing, but very important nonetheless.
I'm going to mess with the order now, because I'm going to come to you, Colin, because I think, we started a conversation about skills, and I think, LinkedIn have just produced some excellent research which talks about what are the skills most in demand. Do you want to sort of talk to that and LinkedIn's view of what the skill needs are as we go forwards?
Yeah, thank you. And look, I think one of the luxuries of LinkedIn as a platform of 1 billion members globally is we get a phenomenal view of the global workforce, the global trends. We've just released the report on the 15 emerging skills in Australia, and not surprisingly, and I think Melinda said it really well, and we've heard it all morning, 7 of those 15 are soft skills. So I think what industry is saying is not only do we want to define skills in the traditional sense, but skills to us now is resilience, communication, leadership. The other thing that I think that skills is challenging us all on is that for the first time probably ever, we have 5, 6 generations all working in the workforce at the same time at different levels. We've talked about pathways and non-traditional pathways, but we have this hierarchical approach in business to how we operate, and you earn your stripes and you move up through. Digital is disrupting. We're talking about AI at the moment, what AI is going to do to disrupt the industry. Some of the best skills in AI are coming from the generation that's just starting because they're born into it. Yet, as business leaders, we're trying to dictate the use and direction and applicability of digital and AI without context of use, without context of understanding, and we're applying traditional thinking to that. So I think the challenge for us, whether we look at it from an industry perspective or whether we look at it from a tertiary perspective or skilling as a whole, is how do we look at that differently? How do we put a human centricity to it that allows businesses to say, this is what we need from the students coming into our workforce, whether they be first-time students or repeat learners. How do we get those skills when we need them? So the agility and the pace of change now is greater than it's ever been. So how do we infuse learning more regularly? We've all heard, it's all about lifelong learning and constant learning. Melinda, you're right. The culture of learning in organisation is so diverse. We see, particularly tech, very strong on the culture of learning because you just have to. It's moving so quickly. But you go to traditional industries and, you go to the building and construction industry, for example, get someone to go and do a training course or go to frontline workers. You can do your learning, but do it after hours or do it at your own time. And when you've got an economy that's saying we already feel stressed and overworked and underappreciated, to ask someone to learn after hours is just another burden that they choose not to do. And then on top of that, we have portability. More than ever, it is easy for someone to say, I'm passionate, this is what I want, and I want meaning. For humans, life is about meaning. And our challenge is we're not giving the opportunity for people to put their passion. When we talk through, skills of the future and learning, what we're hearing from a number of our partners is we're now asking different questions. When we sit down with students, we're not sitting down and saying to students, do you want to be an accountant? Do you want to be a lawyer? Does your dad want you to be a doctor? We're actually asking questions like, what excites you? If you get up in the morning and go to work and you have 8 hours of work, how many of those 8 hours do things that motivate you, energise you and excite you? And how many of those hours deflate you, bore you, defeat you? Now go create your future. But industry isn't helping apply that. industry saying, we want those skills and that agility and that flexibility and creative thinking, but we as industry haven't put a structure in place that supports the nurturing and time of that. We're expecting them to be delivered to us. So I think the challenge for industry is to lean back into that in the same way we're asking the vocational education sector to help us develop those critical skills and soft skills.
That's like the perfect segue. I couldn't have dreamt it up better myself. I think you used a couple of terms there that I thought were really interesting. You talked about the importance of context, the application of skills in a context, which then takes you to this idea of industry has a responsibility, doesn't it, to sort of help to drive the education and training system, the supply of skills in the right way. So, Yas, you've seen this from many perspectives. You're absolutely in the sort of the nuts of it in terms of the New South Wales Digital Skills Contact, IATD as an institution within sort of Sydney. I mean, give some perspectives, if you can, from your experience around how important it is that industry leans in, and why doesn't it always lean in as much as it might, and what could be done to get it moving in the right way?
Thanks, PK. So I want to answer this just by highlighting that there's really strong evidence that just one industry experience can help to make the entry to employment smoother and faster for students. I think we've probably all seen that. And I think that's why our entire system actually tries to provide a lot of those experiences. What I haven't heard today is the acknowledgement of the extraordinary effort that I see from my chair across TAFE and higher education equally, universities, to provide those experiences to students. We have, I'll go through the laundry list, guest lectures, curriculum advice, work-integrated learning, internships, co-creation of courses. Microsoft is heavily involved in all of that, as are our competitors and many other businesses. And it's a lot of work. And I think there is a lot of leaning in, otherwise your institutions wouldn't be able to guarantee students those experiences, which I know you do as part of your value proposition. So I just want to acknowledge the effort that's going into that. And I think where we're seeing the evidence of that actually is if you look at employer satisfaction rates, they're pretty high. I look at the employer response surveys every year, and they're usually sitting at around 84%. Is that a perfect metric? Probably not, but it's a really good one that we can look at. So employers are on the whole pretty happy with graduates, and TAFE students actually are rating even higher than that. Where I think that we need to be more connected is around planning for the disruption that's coming. We don't really know what the pace of that is going to be yet, but it is coming. And it's those conversations that we need to be leaning into, talking about new models, talking about the way we're presenting information about courses and skills to students. I also have 3 daughters. I was relating very much to some of your comments there, Melinda. I have one daughter who also completed a psychology degree and has decided she doesn't want to do that anymore. So she's shopping around at the moment to try and figure out which job does she want to be. And by the way, I would say all of this is very much coloured with fear from students. They're afraid. They read everything we read as well, and when they hear things like all the jobs are going away and we won't need all of these roles, they're paying very close attention to that, and they're thinking very hard about where they're going to put their money. Into the comment about customers, make no mistake, they are customers. My daughter right now is shopping around for a skill set. She comes to her mum, who's a future skills lead, and I say, you should go get some advice about that. It's hard. It's really hard out there for consumers of learning and skills to find that dream job, to land in that place when it's changing around them. So we have a responsibility together to have that conversation and really pull it apart. I feel like we did some of that at the Institute of Applied Technology Digital, and we've been in a bit of a bubble because we've been innovating under a pilot, but we designed a model for people looking to transition into new careers who need upskilling and reskilling because their organisations may not be providing that. We need to look at models like that. There will be a complete evaluation, which is fantastic. But that's the conversation we need to be having more of. I feel like we've kind of nailed the engagement piece. That's very healthy, and I'm not even worried about Gen AI in curriculum. I'm not worried about education. In fact, education is moving at a slightly faster pace than some of the other sectors, which may also surprise you in terms of adoption of generative AI. We've got, whole school systems have got their kids using generative AI applications. So they're coming, and I think you know that. I don't think we need to overbake this conversation. In 12 months' time, pretty much every university in TAFE will have figured out how they're going to build it into curriculum and how their people are using generative AI. It's the conversation around what's changing in the workforce that we've really got to get serious about.
Sally, you would have listened to this morning's conversation, all of this, like, how does it feel to be the CEO of a premier sort of TAFE? What are the challenges that you're seeing as you deliver your work today, but also as you start to think about harmonised tertiary sectors and what that looks like? Where does that leave you?
Thanks, Patrick. As you know, I'm the eternal optimist. So I think harmonisation provides enormous opportunities for all of us in the tertiary sector. For those of you who might not know TAFE particularly well, our brand is that we provide hands-on practical skilling fast, so you're job ready. So at our TAFE, 80% of our graduates have a job within 6 months. And pretty much that's the majority of those who want a job. Not everyone comes to TAFE looking for a job outcome, interestingly. So the opportunity of harmonisation is great for us in TAFE in that our default is to partner. There's very little that we do without partnership. We are linked at the hip with industry. So every one of our teachers must have a vocational basis to their work. So part of their job is to still remain in industry and bring those skills, obviously, to the areas in which they're working. We also partner heavily with universities, schools, tech partners, everyone. And so I think it's a great moment for vocational education in this harmonised world. I certainly hope it's the opportunity that vocational education is an equally important part of the sector, an equally important choice for young people or all people. Interesting fact, more people who have a degree go on to vocational training than those who begin with vocational training and go on to a degree. And I only learnt this more recently. So the importance of harmonisation is there for actually all of us as individuals. In fact, we probably don't care so much about whether it's university or TAFE. We just want our pathways.
Megan, just building on the harmonised piece, I think it's when you start to reflect on how to bring together universities and the vet sector, what does that relationship look like? What's the sort of conversations that we should be having around how to bring that together? If that's the right language that I even use there.
No, that's good. So I'm going to talk a little bit what harmonisation isn't and then answer that question. And the reason I'm doing that is I wanted to dispel some myths that creep up in this conversation every time I have it. So when we're talking about tertiary harmonisation, we're not talking about integration and we're not talking about homogenisation. We're talking about valuing the diversity and the difference of the two sectors, but building a more coherent and connectedness between them. And so that when we answer the question, what does it look like for the vet sector and universities? So I actually say vet sector and higher ed because we go from system to institution all the time in these conversations. The better lens to look from it is what does it mean for the individual and for industry? And I think that's what we should, how we should be, the lens we should look through it, and then the actors and agents, an agency within the system need to actually sort of think through that. But what it does mean is that, and to me, one of the most important framings of it all ultimately is around lifelong learning, and so a lot of our policy architecture is absolutely not framed around lifelong learning. We still have predominantly entry-level conversations, whether it's vocational or higher education, whether it's funding, regulation, qualification, design, it just goes on and on and on, until we get actually a genuine lifelong learning framework that enables people to move in and out of tertiary education according to their needs, where they are in their working or personal life, on the basis of need and purpose. So that's the opportunity, because people will have to keep moving more and more, and it's not just this. It's not just even up and down. It's diagonally sideways. We need to have a whole conversation, not just about skill shortages, which is all true, but we can have other conversations. It's often about skills gap, but we need to have a really good conversation about skills deepening, and so it's all of these sorts of things that we actually need to bring it. And then the institutions can, over time, work out where they are best situated in all of this to meet those needs. And it doesn't mean universities stop doing research, so I get asked that all the time, so just knock that one out of the park. And it doesn't mean, everyone has to teach a hands-on trade skill. There's a whole diversity there, and if we let that sort of flourish on the basis of a new framework and start embracing excellence, we can actually start getting a world where vocational and higher education are on a more equal footing for the benefit of this future that we're grappling with.
Back to you, Sally, then. When you think about that vision that Megan's just sort of articulated, what are the sort of the barriers, challenges that you think will need to be addressed sort of sooner rather than later to help keep the thing moving in the right direction?
Yeah, I guess less boundaries, more pathways is going to be key, and that will be through collaboration. I think being absolutely customer-led, I think we've all sort of talked about that, but as I said, I think customers, and when I say that I mean students and industry, again, they could care less about the institute. They either want their skilled workforce or they want to follow their passion. So how do we kind of turn ourselves inside out to meet their needs?
And then from an industry perspective, what are the sort of the major barriers that you think need to be addressed to ensure ongoing progress? Colin, Yaz, thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I think that we're going to have to get a lot better at skills transparency, making it very, very clear to learners where they can get the skills that they need. So one of the phrases we use at the IATD is start where you are and exit where you need to. That is almost impossible in our system today. But that a bit because we're not particularly transparent around what we're delivering to learners. There's lots of great descriptions about what you will learn, but not a lot around what you will learn to do. And employers need to know both of those things about their candidates, about their future candidates. And learners are also needing to know that as well before they invest in their education. And that is at all ages and stages, so not just people in the workforce looking to transition potentially or upskill, but it's also school leavers. Will is here and he'll talk a lot about the pain that school leavers are going through to identify those careers that they want to go into. And even if they do, the pathways into those careers are not always clear. We have to do a much better job of illuminating those.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things I would sort of build on that, and I couldn't agree more with what you've said. I think industry needs to develop some patience. I think we're expecting immediacy, and that's unrealistic. I think we need to consider how the skills that are being built are applied and give people the opportunity to apply them. We know that a skill learnt and not used is a skill lost. And I think we need to be clear in terms of what those pathways are. I think, the number one question that we get at any level in an organisation is what's next? What do I have to do for next? Work is economic opportunity. That's what motivates people to work. You're working, you've heard the saying, we don't want to live to work, we want to work to live. But we don't have that opportunity yet of clarity that applies passion to that. It's just do these skills, get this job, and then maybe you will, maybe you won't. And the over-promotionalisation that students feel they have to do to be seen, to be heard, and to be given access is just overwhelming. And it's not improving our candidates, it's just damaging their mental health and their confidence.
Sorry, I just have to inject one thing because it's a pet peeve. I would love to get rid of the term job ready. I'm not job ready until I finish the job I'm in. And so the expectation that graduates will be job ready for me is absurd. They get ready to be job ready and then they learn at work. Context is everything, as we know. So I do think there's some calibration that needs to happen there so that we're all working from, we're starting from the same place in terms of where we need to take learners into these jobs of the future. I can't underscore that enough, and that might sound strange coming from somebody in industry, but it's just not realistic.
So I would just add to that job ready comment, and I worked with an industry association for 20 years until very recently, and it is, you hear the language a lot, it's sort of an expectation, but I agree with you that we've got to be careful about the promise. I was also on the VET Qualifications Reform Design Group, and we had this huge conversation about exactly this issue, and also when I was doing the AQF, Australian Qualifications Framework review work too, because there has been this over-promise about readiness on day one, and it's a little bit, it's tied up in a lot of language too, and even the language of competency is you are competent on day one, and people then get confused with competency and proficiency. So, and then you hear this whole thing about, no one's as good as they ever used to be and all this sort of stuff. And I actually don't think it's right. I think when I graduated, I don't think I could do very much at all, actually. But hopefully I've improved a bit. But I do think, so one of the things that we focused on in the quals reform thing was what's the purpose of a qualification and what are realistic learning outcomes that someone gets from that qualification. And I think that's the right balance, that sets up what the promise is, and it's the beginning of a journey which then is the lifelong piece. So this is not just the end point here, and we need to we need to move past thinking about it in that context as well, and think about it very broadly in terms of that breadth and depth of skills, interpersonal, cognitive, all those things that we don't codify or articulate very well. And how they develop over a person's working life. They're all important in the mix.
So we've got to come to you, job ready, or ready to start a job. Where are you at on that?
Well, I think as close to job ready as you could imagine. If you're an apprentice and worked through 4 years earning and learning, I would argue you are job ready. And licensing says that you are. So I think that's part of it. Really, there'd be very few of our offerings that don't have an element of industry placement or otherwise, and it goes a long way to assisting in that job readiness. And we measure our success by our students and our industry partners who essentially say, I got the skills I needed to start the job, and the employer saying, you had the jobs, you produced the students or the graduates that have the skills needed. So that's a pretty good measure of job readiness.
Can I just add, I agree with that point Sally made, and I really didn't talk about application in the workplace. And apprentices are probably the most job ready, and the alignment between post-qualification and ongoing employment that lines up to where the qualification is the highest. It's really high, and the rewards are good. But we're talking about 10% of the system, and so that becomes the dominant narrative or dominant expectation across the system. That was what I was referring to.
And I guess one of the biggest things that we're doing as an institute at the moment is converting as many of possible of the courses that we offer into earn and learn. So cost of living is biting hard. Even if study is free, it's unaffordable to live without, say, 3 jobs and be able to study. So we're converting and looking to bring online a nursing traineeship so that you can actually afford to study. And we'll do that in as many offerings as possible. So that's one of the biggest changes happening in our institute at the moment.
Just move the conversation on a little bit. We've talked about pathways, talked about the role of industry. If I focus on sort of the world that we live in, sort of finance, technology and business, technology in particular, it's like moving at a million miles an hour. And what we see is that there are inconsistent demand signals that come out from industry about what are the skills that they want. So therefore, the education training system, you, VET and others, don't have a clear North Star that they can align with. So when we talk about pathways, let's talk about technology because that's most uncertain and that's where the AI thing is going. Who owns those pathways? Who should take responsibility for defining those pathways so we're sending clear signals? Do you think industry is ready to do that, or do we have to lean in to help them with that? Anybody?
I'll have a go. I think industry has to be involved, but I think we must make sure that we don't see pathways as sort of a set and forget type thing, because that's much of where we've come from and creates much of the problem going forward, because that was the point I was making before, trying to make, about skills and knowledge being combined and recombined and applied and reapplied, that gives the agility and the adaptability, and I think that that's going to be what we need forward. So you can actually get multiple pathways from that world, hopefully on a needs basis, and you can hopefully get more agency into the individual learner to help work out their pathways and their requirements, and in concert with industry. So there's some really important connections there. And so to the earlier point, everyone needs to be engaged in this. It's not one or the other. It's the mutual obligation's enormous to get this right, but we need to get those settings right to enable a more adaptable response.
Yeah, I might be a little bit controversial here in the fact that I'm going to make a reference to skills taxonomies and a common skills language. I think the biggest problem, and it's a humanity thing, we don't agree. That's one of the great things about humanity, is we debate and we express ideas and we share ideas and we form our own opinions, and trying to push a path that says this is a skills taxonomy that aligns to this role, this industry. Business has a different perspective of how they're trying to differentiate themselves, how they're competing in the market, how they're either being disrupted or they're disrupting. And it's moving so quickly, and particularly if we talk about it through the tech sector or the digital sector, what we see through the insights we can get from the economic graph, that is the underlying data that sits under the LinkedIn platform, is just how quickly the skills of the future measure is. We can run another report in 3 months' time and we'll get a different list of 15 than we got in January. But I think what's more interesting about that aspect is it spawns conversation, it spawns debate, and it spawns innovation to evolve in whatever way we need to evolve. So Vic Uni, for example, they're using the insights from our economic graph just to start a debate or start a conversation about what is the offerings that we need to present, where should we be positioning ourselves. That doesn't mean they'll use them, but they're using the insights to start a conversation, because we're data-driven. Right, this is a data-driven world now, and we need something to base the conversation on. I have no doubt that's what's driven, your planning.
Absolutely, and I guess needless to say, industry is not homogenous. So we specialise in automotive training, and we work with every manufacturer in Australia and worldwide, and they don't have the same expectations or needs. And so our challenge as the institute, as the training partner, is how we can be responsive to each. So there's a common element, but then there's also specialisation, and I would say our challenge, and we heard Paul earlier, he said their organisation now can get a spec on Monday and produce, enrol people on Friday. I mean, that is a dream for us. We are miles off that, but we have improved our rate of producing curriculum, reduced it by 30%, so we're on our pathway, but our challenge is to be on our toes to industry. And we have a model where it's not just a matter of coming to our TAFE to learn. We have a workplace delivery model where we go to industry, and that's where we deliver the training, and that's increasingly popular as well. So in TAFE, you just have to be industry-led.
the answer is just together. Neither one of us, but together. The landscape is changing really quickly. Also, industry doesn't know everything. We're in a highly experimental stage with these new technologies, learning also as we talking collectively as we go. So, the thing that's on my mind a lot is we are a system. K-12 is also very much a part of that system, and they're not often in this conversation. And government, we are a system, and are we optimising that system to have these conversations? I think is our opportunity. We're having it in lots of different places at lots of different times, but are we leveraging learnings across the system and empowering each other with those learnings so that we can create a more efficient system for learners? I think that's a huge opportunity for us.
So last question from me, and then I think, Martin, some questions from the floor. You may not guess it, but I'm actually a soldier by trade, 30 years in the army in the UK and in Australia. And soldiers are not the sharpest people in the world. And when we deploy overseas to Afghanistan or Iraq or the Balkans, Northern Ireland, it's always a highly uncertain environment. And so the way that we make sense of uncertainty is to sort of apply frameworks to things. So there are two frameworks that we apply to an uncertain environment, which determines really how we act and how we respond. So they haven't been rehearsed on this, but I'm going to tell you what those two frameworks are. Then I'm going to ask you which one you think we need to apply to the reform of the education training sector. And then I want you to tell me what it is you think we should do next. So the two frameworks are these, and this very much picks on the Medici effect and the stuff that you talked to, Don, earlier. So we have two loops. We have an OODA loop and we have an ASDA loop. So ASDA means act, sense, decide, act. So if you think of it in terms of a hornet's nest, you pick up a pole, you shove it in the hornet's nest, you see what happens and you respond to what happens. The alternate, and you do that when you don't know what's going on, when it's highly uncertain, difficult. So you just got to try and make sense of your environment by stimulating it. The other approach is to do the OODA approach. So this is to observe, orient, decide, act. So that's where you are more clear as to what you have in front of you and how you should then respond to that. So ASDA, highly uncertain. OODA, a little bit more sort of conventional, taking your time, less risk because you're taking the time to sense what's happening within your sector before you then respond. So my question to the panellists is, are we in an ASDA world or in an OODA world? And what do you think it is we should be doing next? Who'd like to start?
Oh, I'll have a go at that. I'm the tech guy here. I live in the first one. So, in the world of AI, we can do two things. We can sit and observe and wait and hope it works for us, or we can have a go. And we've heard that all day. And whilst, there's a lot more uncertainty in terms of how AI will be, and you've heard all the conspiracy theories and how it's going to end the world, I'm an optimist by nature. And the more I play, the more I see applicability that makes my output, my productivity better because I can see a human lens through it. And I think what AI is showing me is I can't possibly, my little brain cannot keep up with everything that's going on in the world, but I'm endlessly curious. I want to know something and I want to test it. What AI is giving the ability to do is pull that, test it, and then I use forums like this, and any forum, anyone who works with me knows, if you've got 10 minutes for a conversation, I'll take 30 of it, because I just want to test my idea and then move forward on it. Now, that might not mean it's right, and we may fail and have to come back and go again. But I think, my experience working with Microsoft is that's how it works, is they're on the front foot and they're trying. And I think as a tech sector, we've got some motivations behind it. And you can see those motivations in many cases, but it's a forward-leaning approach rather than an observation approach. And, we act or get run over is kind of how I see it.
So I'm going to give you a quick break, but I'm going to come back to you because I want you to tell me what the act is. So what's the thing you want us to do? Who else would like to go? Sally?
Well, I would say it's a combination of both. If I think of one of the things that we're trying to do at the moment is, and we've been charged by the Victorian government to do this, is to try and solve the problem that I think we all experience in this room of recognition of prior learning. And it won't just be a matter of observing it and trying to solve. So it's perhaps more the hornet's nest scenario where we're developing an AI-enabled RPL so that it's affordable and hopefully will be a solution for everyone in this room over the next couple of years. So I would say it's a combination of both. We have to use the data that we've got and be quite considered, but we absolutely need to come in and solve the problems that we've been experienced for over long periods of time.
And would you say RPL is the thing to get in around?
To cut through? Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. It's essential. If we're going to unlock all of the capability that exists within our workforce, and we heard Melinda talk about these significant workforce needs that aren't being met, RPL is going to be a huge part of that solution.
Excellent. Thank you. Uda Asda.
I'll have a go. I hate a false binary, so I'm going to line up with Sally. And I was I'm actually going to reword it too, so sorry about all of this.
Whole new mnemonic, excellent.
I'm much more comfortable replacing the word act with experiment or explore, because I don't want to then also just react. And instead of observe, even though I think the power of observation is incredibly important, I think reflection is also a good word in that one as well. And I think that we need a combination of all these things and applied differently to the different circumstances. But inaction is probably the worst of all worlds, isn't it? And we need to get a bit more fleet of foot in all of it.
Is there a one thing?
Tertiary harmonisation.
Just a small thing?
Yeah, well, just because it captures everything else I'd like to say. So, but it's really about the directional, about getting a better, fit-for-purpose, focused tertiary education system to meet the challenges.
Thank you. Megan. Yes.
I think I'm going to go for the second one, just because I think we've done a lot of observing. I think we've had a lot of conversations, we've had a lot of reports. I was mentioning to Martin earlier, I pulled up a report from 2 years ago that had a lot of elements in it that are being recommended by the JSA recent report and by the Accord. So we're sort of past that stage, I think, and also thanks to the education sector, we have interrogated AI. We're still doing it, and we need that. That is the optimal role for education, is to question these technologies as they pertain to how we teach and learn. I actually think that's really important, but we have a lot of that under our belt now as well. And so I think we're getting ready to act. I can't imagine we'll be sitting here in a year's time having the same conversation, given all of the evidence that we have amassed, all of the trends that we're seeing and all the actions that are already being taken. We've got some big moves happening. We've got efficacy emerging around the impact of Gen AI on teaching and learning. Macquarie University just 2 days ago, improving grades by 10%. That's a big deal. So we've got the evidence we need coming forward. And so we're ready to act. And if I had to choose one thing, I'd say all the things, and then I get to say something else. But I think I would like to see micro-credentials have a formal seat at the table. And I know that's a function of RPL and harmonisation, but there's a real role for them to play in this disruptive period we're entering in the workforce.
Thanks, yeah, it's brilliant. Colin,
yeah,
last word.
I'll just credentialise that. Micro-credentials on our platform in the last 3 years, the increase in individuals updating their skills has grown by 140%. That says to me people have gone from saying I did this job with this role to these are the skills that I have done in that role to help them broaden their job search around the things that they're passionate about and the skills that they've developed rather than the roles that they've had. So, yeah, second, the micro-credentialing.
Please. Brilliant. I'm going to hand across to Kelly. Thank you. I'm just reflecting on what my own act is. So I'm absolutely an ASDA person, and the act that we're focused on within the FSO is to address urgent skill gaps. Urgent skills gaps are the digital skills gap that sits across the economy, and it is obviously the AI literacy skills gap that goes there. So if we did nothing else apart from just do that and do that at scale, I'm thinking that would be a positive step. Kelly.
Thank you. A round of applause for our panel. Thank you. Thanks. Lots of activity on Slido, lots of really fascinating questions.
Your microphone's not working.
Let's see. Nope. There. Thanks, Marcia. I'll give you the one that doesn't work. Lots of great questions on Slido. We want to circle back to one that came right at the beginning, and we're going to invite Melinda to come back up and kind of join us up here. And there was a question we're thinking about skills and education, and nobody likes job ready, but there's something there about having meaningful lives and transforming societies. That's what we are all here to do together. And Melinda mentioned a really good point about productivity and how that's understood. And one of the questions was, so if AI can bring us more joy, and if AI is about giving us more meaningful time, what is the role of leadership around, well, how do we actually spend that more meaningful time? I thought I'd hand over to Melinda to answer that.
Just a small question, and sorry for encroaching on the panel. I was really loving all of your insights, so thank you for that. I think the way I think about this is, if I look at the work that my team are doing, it's really easy for everyone to get really caught up in process and spending lots of time in the how you do things. And the simple answer is the leadership around why and what are you trying to do and achieve. And so I think the very first thing we can do, and it's actually the least risky thing in many respects, is to use generative AI to help us do the process pieces that can help us do it more consistently, faster, and then create the space to spend the time adding more value. And if I think again about some of the research that we've done, we did some research on dynamic capabilities around do our management teams in particular in Australia have the abilities to sense and see new ideas that could help them in their business, to seize those ideas and then to use them to transform their business, right? But it's very simple, makes sense, but we're not doing enough of it. And the number one thing that you sort of hear from businesses, and I see this at a governance level at a board or whatever, is that everyone's got so much time taken up by these processes, by governance and regulation and all the rest of it, that they don't have the bandwidth to do the big brain thinking. So use technology to do the stuff that's easy and repeatable, and create more time for people to actually be curious and to be thinking about things. And I think that's where the leadership is actually encourage people to try to do this and to create space and time for themselves. But then you have to be really clear on what it is you want to see them doing and what the outcome is. And that sort of ties back into comments we heard up here around what's the customer experience or the member experience or even the employee experience you're looking for. How do you measure it? How do you track it? And how do you get people spending more time focusing on that?
Thanks, Melinda. I've got one more question for the panel, if that's okay. So if the panel had to give one piece of advice for action in relation to skills and AI to the whole tertiary sector and to K-12 and government, as per your comments, what would that one piece of advice for action be? I'll hand back to you, Patrick.
I can answer, or I'll give you my view last, but who would like to go first?
I guess my message hopefully that's come through is each of us are just a part of the system, and I think how we integrate and pathway and work with each other is going to be the answer for our customers, both students and industry.
Yeah, I'd say participate would be my one word. Don't watch it, participate. You don't have to get it right. It doesn't have to change your world immediately, but you're either in it or it's happening to you, so participate.
I think just the acceptance that every one of us is going to either be using AI applications or making them. So just by the way, we haven't finished our our innovation around technology. There's more to come in the future, and we're going to need people, and people are going to be required to be creating new applications. And so in education, I think it's really important that we grapple with AI in the context of disciplines. So we talk a lot at a very high level, but what does that look like when it's dropped down into the disciplines, and how should we be preparing learners with those skills?
Yeah, I'd agree with everything that's been said, which is the problem of going last or second last. But I think the critical responsibility of the education and training system from kindergarten all the way through is to help individuals develop the skills to deal with AI, the world of AI. So it really strengthening those sort of cognitive skills and, the ability to discern, to create, imagine, distinguish, all those sorts of things, rather than just the sort of knowledge approach where this is the truth and accept the truth. It's going to be a different approach to learning, and I think that can be a terrific thing if we put the right effort into it.
And I would add only to say we need to be urgent. Like this, the train's already left the station. It's moving at 1 million miles an hour. We need to now have skilling solutions in place, recognising that they're never going to be perfect because it's going to move at pace, and be comfortable with that. We need to have a more agile system that's able to get on board. Otherwise, we will be left behind.
That's a very good note to leave us with there. I hope you're hearing me. Yes, you are now. The idea of urgency, I'm not sure that I want to go around poking hornets' nests too often, Patrick. It certainly brings some urgency into my life, I'm sure. And it sort of gives me a great opportunity to thank Patrick and this panel, and please join me in thanking them for their contributions. And maybe as I whisk you urgently to lunch, which is about to be served, I might just use that as an opportunity to then just reflect on what we've heard so far today. In that we started off with a provocation from afar of what AI might mean to the future of learning and how it might impact jobs from Paul LeBlanc first thing this morning. We had a lot of leaders of our public universities respond to that and describe how they believe their own strategies and strategic developments might be impacted by what he was able to share and how they're seeing that technology. And we've had in this session now, with Melinda having started us off with Patrick, and a range of people from a beautifully new harmonised tertiary sector of the future of what Australia needs, what businesses need, and I hope by relaying some thoughts of that from our students, whether they're our own family or thoughts further afield, what change is needed across that combination and those partnerships that Theo started with us with at the very start of today. What is it, the action that's needed here? And I repeat my call to the room at the very start of the day of if this is just us talking about the challenges that we're facing, as Catherine Livingstone put it, and admiring our challenges will do one thing. But if we are to drive towards, to your point, Patrick, the actions that we will take, we will go that much further. So I'm really looking forward to you getting something to eat, replenishing everything, and coming back this afternoon. And in the conversations that I hope will take place between now and when we resume at 1:40, back in this room and hopefully on live stream next door and around our engagements, that you'll have had a chance to interact with people, do some more poetry around the questions and answers you came with today, and to further think about the actions that we can take, whether you're poking hornets' nests or just watching what's going on, in navigating change into the future. Thanks very much for joining us today. Enjoy lunch breaks.